Her hands trembled as she gripped the expensive fabric of the stranger's sleeve. Every sob was a jagged breath, her voice barely a whisper through the terror. "Please, they're beating my mama, please, she's dying." In an instant the air in the room turned to ice. The clinking of Scotch glasses ceased. The low murmur of criminal deals vanished, replaced by a suffocating silence. Every head turned, but not to look at the girl. They looked at the man she had dared to touch. Sitting there in his black fedora, skin mapped with the ink of 100 sins, was Mancini, the most ruthless boss to ever rule the Chicago underground. A man who lived by the rule that sentiment is a death sentence was now staring into the tear-filled eyes of a child in a pink dress. What Mancini did in that moment didn't just break his own rules, it left the entire city speechless. This isn't just a story of a rescue, it's the moment a monster found his soul. Stay with me until the very end, because the way Mancini handled the men who touched that girl's mother will leave you chilled to the bone. Before we reveal his first move, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The back room of Saul's Tavern wasn't a place where people laughed. It was a place where debts were settled, where territories were divided, where men who'd made the wrong enemies came to beg for one more day. And at the center of it all sat Mancini. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to slam his fist on the table or wave a gun around like some two-bit thug trying to prove himself. The tattoos crawling up his neck and across his knuckles did the talking for him. A serpent coiled around his throat, numbers and symbols etched into his hands that told the story of every deal, every betrayal, every body that had disappeared when someone forgot the rules. The black fedora cast a shadow across his face, but everyone in that room could feel his eyes. Cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that measured you, found you wanting, and decided your fate before you even opened your mouth. 3 men sat across from him now, sweating through their cheap suits. One of them kept glancing at the door like he was thinking about running. Mancini saw it, he always saw it. "You borrowed 15,000, Mancini said, his voice low and even. "You've paid back 3, where's the rest?" The man in the middle, a balding waste of space named Paulie, stammered something about his mother's medical bills. Mancini didn't blink. Around the room his men stood like statues. No one moved, no one coughed. When Mancini was talking, even the smoke seemed to hang still in the air. "Your mother," Mancini repeated, tapping one tattooed finger against the table. "That's touching, Paulie, really, but I'm not a charity, I'm not your priest, I'm the man you made a promise to." Paulie's hands shook. His friends said nothing, they knew better. "You've got until Friday," Mancini continued. "All of it, or we're done being civilized." That word, civilized, coming from a man whose face looked like a prison wall, was almost funny. But nobody laughed, not here, not ever. This was Mancini's kingdom, a grimy bar on the south side where the bourbon was watered down and the lights were kept dim so nobody had to look too closely at what was happening in the corners, where deals were made in whispers and enforced with broken bones, where the unspoken rule was simple: you didn't disrespect the man in the fedora, you didn't waste his time, and you sure as hell didn't make him repeat himself. Paulie nodded frantically and stumbled toward the exit with his friends. The door swung shut behind them. Mancini lifted his glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the dim light. His lieutenant, Marco, stepped forward. "Think he'll come through, boss?" Mancini took a slow sip. "He'll try or he won't, either way Friday comes." The room settled back into its rhythm. Low conversations, the clink of glasses, the shuffle of cards at a corner table. And then the door burst open. She shouldn't have made it past the door. Mancini's men were good at their jobs. They kept out cops, kept out rival crews, kept out anyone who didn't belong. But the little girl in the pink dress moved like a storm, wild, unstoppable, beyond reason. She flew past Dominic at the entrance before he could even process what he was seeing. Past the card table where Joey started to rise from his chair. Past Marco, who reached out too late, his fingers closing on empty air. And then she was there, right there, at Mancini's table. Her tiny hands latched onto his sleeve, the expensive fabric of his dark suit now smeared with something wet and red. Blood. Fresh blood streaming down her forehead, matting her pigtails, staining her small fingers as they clutched at him with desperate strength. Mancini's hand had already moved to the gun at his hip. Instinct, muscle memory from 30 years of staying alive, but he froze. The child's face was a mask of terror. Tears carved clean lines through the blood on her cheeks. Her chest heaved with sobs so violent her whole body shook, and her eyes, those wide, pleading eyes, locked onto his like he was the only person left in the world. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking into pieces. "Please, mister, they're beating my mama." The room died. Every conversation stopped mid-word. Every glass hung suspended between table and lips. Every card remained unplayed. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed to hold its breath, the last notes of some forgotten song fading into nothing. Mancini stared at the child, at the blood on her dress, at her small hands gripping his sleeve like she thought he could save her, like she thought he was someone who saved people. "They're hurting her," the little girl's voice climbed higher, cracking with panic. "She's screaming and there's so much blood and they won't stop. Please, you have to help her, please." Marco moved forward, his voice low and careful. "Boss, I'll handle this." "Don't touch her." The words came out of Mancini before he'd even thought them. His eyes never left the child's face. She couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 7. The pink dress was the kind a mother would save up for, would pick out special for church or a birthday party. Now it was ruined. Now this little girl was standing in a room full of killers, begging a monster for mercy. "Where?" Mancini heard himself ask. His voice sounded strange, distant. "The apartment," she sobbed. 3 blocks, the red building with the broken steps. "Apartment, please, mister, please hurry. They said they're gonna kill her." The tattoos on Mancini's hands seemed to darken in the dim light as his fingers slowly uncurled from his glass. Friday's debt collections suddenly didn't matter anymore. The child's hands were still on his sleeve, small, warm, alive. Mancini stared at them and saw other hands, smaller hands, a lifetime ago. Sophia had been 5 when it happened, dark curls instead of pigtails, a yellow dress instead of pink. She'd grabbed his sleeve just like this the morning they took her, tugged on it while he was reading the paper, asking him to come see the butterfly she'd found in the garden. "Later, Piccola," he'd told her, "Papa's busy." There was no later. The bomb had been meant for him, a message from the Calabrese family about territory and respect and all the things men killed each other over. But the car hadn't been his that morning. His wife, Elena, had taken it to drive Sophia to her grandmother's house. He'd been too busy, too important, too caught up in being the man everyone feared. The blast had turned a sunny Tuesday into ash and screaming metal. He'd built the walls after that, brick by brick, meeting by meeting. Every ruthless decision, every cold calculation, every time he looked at someone begging for mercy and felt nothing, those were the walls. The fedora became a roof over those walls. The tattoos became warnings etched into the foundation. Keep out, stay away, don't get close. Sentiment was weakness. Love was a target painted on your back. Caring about someone meant giving your enemies a knife and showing them exactly where to stick it. For 23 years, those walls had held. And now this child, this bleeding, sobbing little girl who didn't know his name or his reputation or how many men he'd buried, was asking him to care again. "Boss," Marco's voice cut through the memory, "what do you want us to do?" Mancini looked at the blood on his sleeve, at the girl's desperate face. Every logical thought in his head screamed at him to walk away. Send Marco to check it out. Make a phone call to someone who handled this kind of thing. Keep the walls intact. Stay behind the fedora where it was safe and cold and nothing could hurt him. But Sophia's voice whispered in his memory, "The butterfly, Papa, come see." He'd never seen the butterfly. The little girl's grip tightened. "Please, mister, my mama needs you." Something inside the walls cracked, just a hairline fracture, barely visible, but Mancini felt it like an earthquake. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The fedora stayed on. The tattoos stayed visible. But when he looked down at the child, something in his expression shifted, just for a second, from the man who ruled through fear to the man who'd once pushed a little girl on a swing. "Marco, Dominic, Joey," his voice was steel. "Get the car, bring the medical kit, and bring the heavy guns." He looked at the child. "Show me where." The red building looked like it had given up years ago. Cracked foundation, graffiti-scarred walls. The broken steps the girl had mentioned jutted out at dangerous angles, edges crumbling into concrete dust. Mancini took them 2 at a time. The little girl, Bianca, she told him in the car between sobs, ran ahead, her pink dress a flash of color in the grey hallway. The door to 2C hung open, one hinge torn completely free. It swayed slightly in the draft from the stairwell. The smell hit him first, copper and fear, blood and sweat and violence. Then he saw her. Bella was crumpled against the far wall like something discarded. Her face was a landscape of bruises, purple blooming across her cheekbone, one eye swollen completely shut. Blood ran from her nose, from a split in her lip, from somewhere in her hairline. Her shirt was torn, her arm bent at an angle that made Mancini's jaw clench. But she was breathing, shallow, rattling breaths that bubbled with liquid but breathing. Mama, Bianca threw herself toward her mother. Mancini caught her by the shoulders, held her back. Don't touch her, not yet. His voice was gentler than he'd used in years. Marco, get the medic, now. The apartment told the story his eyes didn't want to read: overturned furniture, shattered dishes, a child's drawings scattered across the floor, tiny crayon butterflies trampled under boot prints. The kitchen table had a leg missing. There was blood on the wall where someone's head had been slammed. Again and again. This wasn't a beating, this was a message. Dominic appeared at his shoulder. Place is clear, boss, they're gone. Left maybe 10-15 minutes ago based on. I don't care when they left. Mancini's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made even Dominic take a step back. I care who they are and where they went. Working on it. Mancini knelt beside Bella, careful not to move her. Her good eye fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. She tried to speak, blood bubbling at her lips. Bianca, she whispered, is she? She's safe. Mancini removed his fedora, set it aside. It felt important somehow, like the hat was part of the armor and this woman needed to see something human. Your daughter brought me, she's very brave. A sound escaped Bella's throat, half sob, half laugh, all agony. Stupid girl, shouldn't have, those men are. Dangerous. Mancini's tattooed hand hovered near her broken arm, assessing the damage. Lady, you have no idea what dangerous looks like. Not yet. The medic pushed through the door, bag already open. Behind him, Joey's voice came through on Marco's radio. Boss, we got an ID on the crew. Local gang. Call themselves the Red Serpents. 3 witnesses saw them leave, heading toward their clubhouse on. Get the address. Mancini stood, the cold flooding back in. Get the names, get everything. He looked at Bianca, at her mother bleeding on the floor, at the destroyed life scattered around them. The walls cracked wider. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes. No sirens, no questions, just Dr. Reyes and his team moving with the kind of efficiency that came from treating bullet wounds at 3 in the morning without filling out paperwork. Mancini had called in the favor from the car. 1 sentence, I need you at the red building on Ashland, now. Reyes had been stitching up Mancini's people for 15 years. He knew better than to ask why. Punctured lung, Reyes muttered, his hands working quickly as his team stabilized Bella's neck. Fractured ribs, broken ulnar, possible skull fracture. She needs a hospital, a real one. Then get her to St. Catherine's. Mancini's tone left no room for negotiation. Private room, no police reports. You tell them she's family and I'm covering everything. Mancini. Everything, Reyes, you understand. I don't care what it costs, you keep her alive. The doctor met his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. I'll need to ride with her. The lung is. Goes. They loaded Bella onto the stretcher with practiced care. Bianca tried to climb in after her, but Mancini caught her gently. They need to work, Piccola. We'll follow right behind them. But Mama. We'll be okay, I promise. The words felt foreign in his mouth. When was the last time he'd promised someone anything that wasn't a threat? The ambulance pulled away, lights flashing now. Legal, official, just another emergency in a city full of them. Mancini's phone rang. Marco. We found them, boss, 4 guys. Clubhouse on 52nd, just like Joey said. They're celebrating, drinking, laughing about. Marco's voice went tight. Laughing about the woman, about the money she couldn't pay. The crack in Mancini's walls became a chasm. How many other people in the building? It's clear, just them and maybe a lookout. Good. Mancini looked at Bianca, at the blood still drying on her face, at the trust in her eyes that he didn't deserve. He made his voice soft. Dominic's going to take you to the hospital. Stay with your mama, hold her hand, talk to her. She needs to hear your voice. Where are you going? Mancini replaced his fedora, the armor sliding back into place, to have a conversation with some men who forgot their manners. He walked toward his car, pulling out his phone. 3 more calls, 3 more favors, each one answered on the first ring. Tony, I need the warehouse on Cicero cleared. 1 hour. Vincent, bring the truck and the tools, the full set. Sal, tell your nephew at the precinct that whatever comes through tonight about 52nd Street, he didn't hear it. By the time he slid into the driver's seat, the machine was in motion. His people moved through the city like shadows, converging on a single point. No sirens, no witnesses, just the cold mathematics of retribution. Marco's voice crackled through the radio. We're in position, boss, awaiting your order. Mancini started the engine. The tattoos on his hands looked almost black in the streetlight. Nobody leaves that building alive. He paused, Sophia's yellow dress flashing in his memory. Correction, I want them alive. What comes after, that's when they stop breathing. St. Catherine's smelled like antiseptic and dying flowers. Mancini hated hospitals, had hated them ever since he'd identified Elena and Sophia by the jewelry they'd been wearing because there wasn't enough left of their faces. But Bianca's hand was in his, small, sticky with dried blood, trusting, and so he walked through the automatic doors like he owned the place, which in a way he did. St. Catherine's board of directors had been very grateful for his donation last year, grateful enough not to ask questions. Dominic had gotten the girl cleaned up in the car. The blood was gone from her forehead, just a shallow cut, nothing that needed stitches. But her pink dress was ruined beyond saving, and someone had found her a hospital gown that dragged on the floor when she walked. Bella Morti, Mancini told the nurse at the desk. His voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice that made people move quickly. Where is she? Surgery, 3rd floor, Dr. Reyes is. I know who Dr. Reyes is. Mancini was already moving toward the elevator, Bianca keeping pace beside him. The 3rd floor waiting area was empty except for Marco, who stood when he saw them. Boss, Reyes said another hour, maybe 2. The lung was worse than he thought, but she's stable. He's optimistic. Optimistic, as if that word meant anything when a little girl's mother was being cut open on a table. Mancini nodded. Marco understood the dismissal and disappeared down the hallway. Bianca stood in the middle of the waiting room, looking impossibly small in the oversized gown. Her eyes were red, her hands twisted together. Is Mama going to die? The question hit him like a fist, simple, direct, terrifying. Mancini knelt down, his knees protesting the movement. His fedora brushed against her shoulder. No, he said, and then because lies were for people who had something to lose. Dr. Reyes is the best, your Mama's strong. She's going to fight and she's going to win. But what if she forgets me? Bianca's voice cracked. What if she wakes up and doesn't know who I am? I saw it on TV once. A lady got hurt and she forgot her whole family. Mancini felt something twist in his chest, something that had been dead for 23 years trying to crawl back to life. He reached out slowly, carefully, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Bianca's ear. The gesture felt ancient, remembered. Your Mama will never forget you, Piccola. You know why. Bianca shook her head. Because you're the reason she's alive right now. You ran through a dangerous neighborhood. You walked into a room full of scary men. You grabbed my sleeve even though you didn't know me. You were braver than soldiers I've known. His tattooed hand rested gently on her shoulder. A mother doesn't forget a daughter like that. It's impossible. Promise. The word hung between them, sacred binding. Mancini thought about Sophia, about yellow dresses and butterflies, about promises he'd broken. I promise. Bianca threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder, and Mancini held her while the walls continued to crumble. The warehouse on Cicero had seen a lot of things: drug deals, interrogations, men who walked in and never walked out, but tonight felt different, colder, more final. 4 men hung from chains bolted to the ceiling beams, not high enough to kill them, just high enough that their toes barely scraped the concrete, just high enough to make every breath an effort. Mancini walked in at exactly midnight. His footsteps echoed. Marco and Tony flanked him, but they kept their distance. This wasn't their show, this was something else entirely. The youngest of the 4, couldn't have been more than 20, started babbling the moment he saw the fedora. Listen, man, we didn't know she was connected. We thought she was just some nobody. We were just collecting what she owed. Shut up, Mancini's voice was quiet, almost gentle, somehow that made it worse. He walked slowly past each of them, reading them. the tattooed serpent on the leader's neck, cheap ink, poorly done, the gold chains they wore like they meant something, the designer sneakers that cost more than Bella probably made in a month. You run protection, Mancini said, not a question. Small businesses, single mothers, people who can't fight back, you call it a tax, you call it insurance, you make them pay for the privilege of not being hurt. The leader, a scarred mess named Vince, tried to laugh. It came out as a wheeze. It's just business, man, same thing you do, same thing everyone does, we're just. The backhand came so fast Vince didn't see it coming. His head snapped to the side. Blood sprayed from his mouth. Same thing I do, Mancini's voice dropped to something sub-zero. You think we're the same? He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a piece of paper, folded carefully. He opened it slowly, smoothing the creases. A child's drawing, crayon butterflies, purple and pink and yellow, at the bottom in careful letters, "For Mama, love Bianca." This was on the floor of Bella Morti's apartment, Mancini said. Stepped on, ground into the dirt by your boots while you beat her unconscious, while her 6-year-old daughter hid in the closet listening to her mama scream. He held the drawing up so they could all see it. Tell me, what part of your business includes terrorizing children? Silence, just the creak of chains and labored breathing. I run this city through fear, Mancini continued. I've done terrible things, I'll do more terrible things before I'm done, but I have rules, lines I don't cross. He stepped closer to Vince. You know what happens when small-time trash like you forgets there are lines. Vince said nothing, his face had gone grey. You get reminded. Mancini folded the drawing carefully, returned it to his pocket. Marco, Tony, start with the hands, the same hands that touched her. Wait, Vince's voice climbed into panic. Wait, please, we'll leave town, we'll disappear, you'll never. You're right, Mancini turned toward the door. I'll never see you again. The screaming started as he reached his car. He didn't look back. Mancini returned to the warehouse 3 hours later. The screaming had stopped. Now there was just whimpering, broken sounds from broken men. 3 of them hung unconscious, their hands wrapped in blood-soaked bandages, crude field dressings, enough to keep them alive, barely. But Vince was still awake, still alert. Marco had made sure of that. Boss, Marco stepped aside, wiping his knuckles on a rag. He's all yours. Mancini stood in front of the gang leader and studied him. Vince's face was a mess of bruises and terror. His hands, what was left of them, hung useless at his sides, but his eyes tracked Mancini's every movement. Good, he needed to see this. Mancini reached into his jacket and pulled out the drawing again. The butterflies looked even more vibrant under the harsh warehouse lights. Innocent, pure, everything these men weren't. Do you have children, Vince? The question caught him off guard. What? Simple question, do you have kids? No, man, I don't. Good, Mancini held up the drawing. Because if you did, you'd understand what you really took from Bella Morti tonight. He smoothed the paper against his palm, tracing one of the purple butterflies with his tattooed finger. This little girl spent an hour coloring this, maybe more. She probably used her favorite crayons, the ones she keeps special. She made this for her mama because she loves her. Vince's breathing came faster. And you know what her mama did with it? Mancini continued. She hung it on the refrigerator, right there in the kitchen, in a place of honor, because when you're working 3 jobs and barely keeping the lights on, a drawing from your daughter is worth more than anything you could ever steal. He stepped closer, close enough that Vince flinched. You didn't just beat a woman who couldn't pay your protection money. You walked into a home. You destroyed a family. You traumatized a 6-year-old child so badly that she ran bleeding through the streets looking for someone, anyone, who could save her mother. Mancini's voice never rose, never shook. That made it more terrifying than any scream. And when that little girl grabbed my sleeve and begged me for help, do you know what I saw in her eyes? Vince shook his head. The same thing my daughter's eyes looked like the morning she died. The warehouse went silent, even Marco shifted uncomfortably. Mancini held the drawing up one last time. This is what strength looks like, Vince. A child who loves her mother enough to face monsters. A mother who works herself to exhaustion to give her daughter a life. That's real power, that's what you tried to destroy. He folded the drawing carefully and returned it to his pocket. You wanted to play in my city, you wanted to be feared, congratulations. Mancini turned toward the door. Now you get to live with the consequences. Marco, make sure they remember this lesson, then dump them at County General. Bossy. Let them live, Mancini's voice was ice. Crippled, broken, a warning to anyone else who thinks children are acceptable collateral damage. 6 months later, Mancini found himself in a place he never expected to be. A coffee shop, midday, sunlight streaming through the windows. No fedora, no guards, no gun pressing against his ribs. Just him, a cup of espresso, and a little girl in a yellow dress, not pink anymore. She'd outgrown that one, colouring at the table beside him. Mr. Mancini, look. Bianca held up her latest masterpiece, Maury butterflies, always butterflies. This one's you. He studied the drawing, a large figure in black with what might have been tattoos or might have been particularly ambitious scribbles, standing next to two smaller figures holding hands. I look angry, he observed. You always look angry, Bianca grinned, but Mama says that's just your face. Does she now? Bella emerged from the counter carrying 2 more coffees and a hot chocolate. The limp from her broken leg was almost gone now. The scars on her face had faded to thin white lines, but it was her smile that caught him, the one that said she was actually happy, not just surviving. She'd tried to pay him back. Every week for the first 3 months she'd shown up at his office with cash, $20, $50, whatever she could scrape together from her new job at the bakery, a job Mancini may have arranged through a friend who owed him a favor. He'd refused the money every time. You don't owe me anything, he told her. I owe you everything, she'd replied. Now she slid into the booth across from him, nudging Bianca's crayons aside to make room. You're late. I had a meeting. The kind with guns or the kind with lawyers? The boring kind. He took a sip of espresso. City Council wants to rezone the neighborhood. I convinced them it would be unwise. Bella raised an eyebrow. Convinced. Persuaded strongly. She laughed, actually laughed. 6 months ago, Mancini wouldn't have believed this woman would ever laugh again. Bianca had abandoned her drawing and was now stealing sugar packets from the dispenser, building a tower. Bella reached over to stop her, but Mancini shook his head. Let the kid build. Let her be 6 years old in a safe place where the worst thing that could happen was a tower of sugar falling over. The red serpents tried to rebuild, Bella said quietly, her eyes on her daughter. I heard about it. They won't be trying again. Mancini. They won't, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Not in this neighborhood, not anywhere near you. She looked at him for a long moment. You know people are talking, saying the big bad Mafia boss has gone soft, that you spend your Wednesday afternoons having coffee with a baker and her kid. Let them talk. Doesn't that worry you, your reputation? Mancini watched Bianca's sugar tower collapse, watched her laugh and immediately start rebuilding. He thought about the walls he'd built, the fedora he'd hidden behind, the years he'd spent believing that caring about someone made you weak. I spent 23 years being feared, he said. Maybe it's time I tried being something else. Bella reached across the table and squeezed his tattooed hand. Like what? He looked at the drawing, the angry figure in black standing protectively beside the 2 smaller ones. Family, he said. Maybe I'll try being family. Bianca looked up from her sugar tower, her eyes bright. Does that mean you're staying for dinner? Mama's making spaghetti. Mancini felt the last of the walls crumble. Yeah, Piccola, I'm staying. And for the first time in 23 years, the man who'd ruled through fear smiled. Not the cold smile of a predator, the warm smile of someone who'd finally come home. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that proves humanity still exists in the darkest places.